What if everything you thought you knew about creation was a carefully constructed lie? What if the very first story, the one etched into our collective consciousness, was just a whisper of a forgotten truth? In 1947, near the ancient site of Qumran, a Bedouin shepherd stumbled upon a discovery that defied belief. Ancient scrolls, hidden for millennia in clay jars. Most contained familiar biblical fragments, but one, almost indecipherable, hinted at a creation story unlike any we knew. Scholars dubbed it the other Genesis. It spoke of beings before humanity, of a different cosmic order, and a divine voice that was far from alone when the world began. This isn't just an ancient text. It's a truth that was buried, erased, and concealed for thousands of years. Because if humanity ever truly remembered it, everything would change. So, before we reveal what was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the bell notifications. Only those who are truly awake will grasp the implications of what's coming. And in the comments, write, "I'm not afraid of the truth. Let the forgotten Genesis begin." A world before Adam. What if Genesis, as we know it, was never the first story? What if our version is just a summarized, filtered account of a far older narrative, sealed away because of its profound implications? This hidden scroll, found covered in soot and bitumen, speaks of events that unfolded before the creation of Adam. It mentions a first Lightbearer, a radiant entity who participated in shaping the world. But something went terribly wrong, and this being was systematically erased from official records. Unlike the familiar Genesis that simply starts with "Let there be light," this alternative account begins with a judgment, a divine separation of two cosmic forces, one of order and one of rebellion. Before land, sea, or sky were even formed, there was a war in the spiritual realms. The earth, it states, wasn't made first. Instead, it was designated to hold the fallen ones, serving as a prison, not a paradise. Could it be that Eden wasn't solely intended for humanity, but was placed atop something far older, darker, and forbidden? The scroll references a realm called Arziel, a word entirely absent from traditional scripture. It's described as the domain between the divine throne and the material world. From this place, the Shining Ones descended, bringing with them profound knowledge and law. But one among them, the first Lightbearer, craved something more, to mold a being in his own image. And from that desire, a cosmic tension erupted, a division that would reverberate all the way to Eden. The formed ones and a layered Eden. The scroll reveals that before Adam, there were the formed ones, beings shaped from celestial fire and dust, given breath not from the earth, but from the winds of Arziel above. They weren't mortal, but they weren't eternal either. Their purpose was to observe, to guard, and to prepare the ground for a creation yet to come. Some fulfilled their role faithfully. Others began to question the divine order, asking why they should serve a creature that had not yet been made. That singular question, the text suggests, was the spark that ignited the first spiritual rebellion. In this ancient version, Adam is not the first man, but the first of a second creation. The scroll describes him as a new vessel, made not only from dust but also from fragments of light stolen from the older realm. His breath wasn't the first given to a being on earth. In fact, the scroll hints that Eden had been visited long before Adam opened his eyes. Traces of former beings remained, hidden from his perception. Sounds in the trees, whispers in the rivers, and ruins beneath the garden's soil. One of the most chilling passages describes a moment just after Adam was placed in Eden. The scroll claims he sensed he was being watched. A voice, soft and ancient, emerged from the east of the garden, uttering, "You are not the first, nor shall you be the last." This directly contradicts the familiar Genesis account where God walks with Adam in harmony. Here, there's chilling ambiguity. Who was speaking? And why was the garden already teeming with unseen memories? The scroll implies the garden itself was layered over an older domain, one filled with profound secrets. The true purpose of the tree and the serpent. The tree of knowledge, in this version, isn't just a source of wisdom, but a sealed gateway. Its fruit was a key, one that would open Adam's eyes not just to good and evil, but to the full truth of what came before. This is why the scroll suggests the command to avoid the tree was more than a test of obedience. It was a dire warning not to awaken what lay beneath Eden's surface. For in that forbidden knowledge also lay the memory of the first Lightbearer and the cataclysmic fall that transformed a garden into a battlefield. According to this forbidden scroll, the serpent was no ordinary creature. It's referred to as the keeper of the threshold. It didn't crawl at first, but stood upright, radiant, covered in shifting glass-like scales. It guarded the tree not to tempt, but to protect. When Eve approached, it didn't deceive her. It recognized her. The scroll's wording is strange and poetic. The keeper saw the image of the one who was lost and opened the way. This suggests the serpent knew something about Eve that even she didn't, a deep connection to a forgotten lineage. Even more shocking, the scroll hints that Eve's decision to eat the fruit wasn't a mistake, but a moment of divine activation. It claims she remembered what had been taken from her. Could Eve have carried within her the remnants of a previous creation? The text implies her eyes opened not only to good and evil, but to the unsettling reality that the God walking in the garden was not alone. There were other presences, some mourning, some angry, some patiently waiting, and her act of disobedience wasn't rebellion. It was remembrance, the layered creator and a cycle of forgetting. This alternative Genesis presents a complex view of the Creator. There is Elyon, the Most High, unseen, eternal. And then there is El Gamil, described as the one who walks, speaks, and shapes. The two aren't enemies, but they aren't entirely the same. The scroll calls El Gamil the voice of formation, and hints that he once served in higher courts before descending. Some scholars believe this could be a veiled reference to the first Lightbearer, not yet fallen, but already seeking a world of his own design. Eden, in this text, is described as a layered realm like a temple with multiple courts. The garden was merely the outermost level. Beneath it lay chambers of fire, water, and wind, each inhabited by beings who had once walked with the divine. The fall of humanity, then, was not a fall down but a fall through a descent into the dense material realm, away from the spiritual harmony of Arziel. And when Adam and Eve were cast out, they weren't just sent to survive. They were sent to forget. One haunting passage describes the moment Adam looked back at the garden as the gates closed behind him. The scroll says he didn't see trees or light, but shadows moving within the garden walls. They mourned, it states, for the light had left again. This raises a disturbing question. Was Eden a place that had already experienced loss before Adam ever entered it? The implication is chilling. Adam wasn't just expelled for his failure. He was repeating a failure that had occurred before, a cycle of creation and forgetting that has plagued the earth since its spiritual foundations were laid. Lost records and prophecies of return. There's also mention of the record of the first breath, a hidden book said to exist beyond the garden, buried beneath stone and guarded by silence. It was written not by man, but by the shining ones who came before. Its pages contain the names of those who fell, those who watched, and those who were erased. The scroll hints that this record was almost recovered once by a descendant of Seth, but was swallowed by the earth during a great shaking, an event, it suggests, not natural but a divine retaliation meant to keep mankind blind. One of the most cryptic sections involves a figure known only as the one who waits in the east. He stands beyond the river that flowed from Eden and split into four. Never named, he remembers the first forming of the earth and knows the words spoken before light. Adam never reached him, but Enoch, the scroll claims, did. And upon his return, Enoch no longer spoke in the tongue of men, but in a fire-like voice that cracked stone and terrified even the sons of men. This leads to a dramatic assertion. Noah's flood wasn't only to cleanse the earth of wickedness, but to wash away the memory of Eden's true origin. The scroll suggests the waters covered more than cities. They drowned scrolls, relics, and voices. Only fragments remained, scattered in caves and ruins, whispered about in secret. The survival of this other Genesis was no accident. It was preserved by those who believed the world would one day forget, and eventually need to remember again. The scroll even speaks of Noah, but not in the familiar way. Before the flood, it says he was given a vision not just of the coming destruction, but of what had existed before the earth was formed. In this vision, Noah saw a realm of crystal seas, burning wheels, and beings without mouths that praised in silence. He was told to write what he saw, but only on a scroll that would never be read aloud. That scroll, known as the Book of the Waters, was sealed inside the ark, not to preserve it, but to hide it from future generations. This changes the purpose of the ark entirely. In the traditional story, it's a vessel of survival. But in this version, it becomes a vault carrying not only the last of humanity and animals, but the last divine knowledge of the old world. The scroll even claims the ark had 2 levels, one visible to passengers, and another hidden chamber that only Noah was allowed to enter. In that chamber, he stored what was called the memory of fire, possibly a remnant from Eden or even Arziel itself. After the flood, Noah didn't just build altars. He built tombs not for the dead, but for truths too dangerous to be told. And over time, the children of men forgot. They worshipped stars, they built towers, and they rewrote the beginning to suit their new gods. The scroll states, "The truth sleeps under stone and silence, but the earth remembers, the rivers remember, and when they rise, so shall the voice of the first forming." Language, memory, and the unveiling. Another striking part of the text speaks of a second garden created after the flood, not by God, but by watchers who remained. It wasn't made of trees and rivers, but of sound, light, and time, invisible to man, but felt in moments of silence, in dreams, and during prayer. It was a place where the divine could still meet those with pure hearts. But even this second garden was eventually sealed, not by rebellion, but by forgetfulness. Humanity had forgotten how to hear the voice behind the veil. The scroll warns of a time when the veil between worlds would thin again. When the stars realign and the earth groans, it says the memory will return, and with it, the watchers. This prophecy is vague but chilling. It suggests the past isn't entirely behind us, that what was hidden beneath Eden, buried under floodwaters, and sealed in caves isn't lost forever. The knowledge, the beings, and the truth of the first creation are waiting, and humanity will once more have to choose between the comfort of ignorance and the cost of remembering. It also offers a peculiar detail. Languages themselves were a barrier placed upon humanity to prevent us from unlocking certain words. The original language of creation, the one spoken before light, was said to carry power, not metaphorically, but literally. A single phrase from this tongue could open gates, call fire, or shake unseen realms. The scroll claims this language still exists, hidden in dreams and embedded in nature, and only the pure of heart, those who walk between shadow and flame, will hear it again. One of the closing passages is perhaps the most poetic. "The river that flowed from Eden did not dry. It sank beneath rock and silence. It flows still, carrying the names of the forgotten." This idea, that Eden's river still moves underground, unseen but alive, is deeply symbolic. It implies the spiritual essence of the original creation was never destroyed. It was submerged, a current of divine memory running beneath history, waiting for someone to follow its path upstream into the truth. The scroll ends with a fragmented blessing, barely readable. "Blessed are those who seek what was before, for they shall remember the sky before the sun." This line echoes a theme throughout the entire hidden Genesis, that the true beginning wasn't marked by light or time, but by presence, by a divine consciousness that breathed not just into Adam, but into a reality that preceded flesh. And perhaps, if we listen closely, we might still hear that breath today, carried in the winds, in the silence, in the forgotten spaces where truth still whispers. The uncomfortable truth. Modern scholars who have seen this scroll remain divided. Some dismiss it as a fabrication, a mystic invention written centuries after Genesis. Others, however, point to linguistic patterns, parchment dating, and references to pre-Israelite cosmology that strongly suggest it may be one of the oldest surviving creation texts in human history. But what frightens them most isn't its age. It's how closely it aligns with echoes found in other banned books. The Book of Enoch, the Apocalypse of Abraham, even ancient Mesopotamian tablets, all speak of a world before the world, a time before Adam, a realm before Genesis. There's also the disturbing implication that mankind's memory was intentionally altered. that after the fall, something or someone interfered with our perception of the past. The scroll speaks of a shimmering veil placed upon the eyes of men, not just spiritually, but generationally. Our ancestors may have once remembered Eden clearly, even spoken of Arziel openly. But over centuries, their stories were ridiculed, rewritten, or erased. The scroll mourns this loss. The children forgot their name. They sang to shadows and called them stars. What makes this even more compelling is that pieces of this forgotten Genesis are still hidden in plain sight. In Psalms, in Job, in Isaiah, there are verses that reference unknown beings, gates of the deep, songs sung before the foundations of the earth. Even in Genesis itself, there are gaps, sudden shifts, and silences that make far more sense when viewed through the lens of this scroll. Could the Bible we have be just a narrowed window, framing a vast and ancient reality that still pulses behind the scenes? The scroll never directly contradicts Scripture. Instead, it expands it. It suggests that the Genesis we know is true but incomplete. A simplified narrative given to a generation that could no longer bear the weight of what had come before. And maybe that was mercy. For to remember the wars of the heavens, the beings that fell, and the knowledge lost, is to awaken a longing and a burden that modern hearts may not be ready for. But the scroll insists, the day will come when silence ends and the stars will speak again. There's an especially cryptic portion that mentions a scroll within the scroll, a hidden layer of writing only visible under divine fire that supposedly holds the true names of the first ones, beings who never fell, never rebelled, and were assigned to guide humanity when the time came. But the scroll claims these names were stolen, scattered across the earth, hidden in mountains, carved into old stone, and whispered in winds. Only when those names are spoken again will the veil be lifted. Until then, the earth remains under amnesia, and Eden remains closed. Some traditions claim that one of these names has already resurfaced. The scroll doesn't state it directly, but hints at a voice crying from the wilderness, echoing the ancient sound that once called the stars into place. Was it a prophecy of John the Baptist? Or is it pointing to something or someone yet to come? The ambiguity is intentional. The scroll warns against rushing to interpret. The one who assumes shall fall. The one who listens shall be shown. Truth, it implies, is not given to the proud, but to the broken-hearted. Then comes a final series of lines, torn, faint, but still readable. The sky opened once, it shall open again, not with fire, but with memory. These words have shaken even the most skeptical historians. What if the return of divine presence isn't marked by wrath or miracles, but by remembrance, by a sudden global awakening to who we truly are and what was taken from us? A reuniting not only of God and man, but of history itself, piecing together the shards of the first creation to form a complete image. And that may be the real reason this scroll was hidden. Not because it contradicted the Bible, but because it revealed too much. Because it made us ask questions we were taught to avoid. Who came before Adam? What lies beneath Eden? Why do the heavens seem silent? Or are we just not listening anymore? The scroll doesn't give final answers. Instead, it hands us a torch and points to the cave. Read, remember, and return. It says, for the beginning was never lost, only buried. And if we dare to believe the scroll, then we must also accept that the creation story isn't just history. It's prophecy. Genesis isn't just about where we came from, but where we are meant to return, not to the physical garden, but to the memory, the presence, the divine communion that once defined existence before corruption. The scroll speaks of a final restoration, not by rebuilding Eden, but by remembering it fully. Every wound, every exile, every silence, all of it. A map leading back to what was once known. This hidden Genesis doesn't rewrite Scripture. It reawakens it. It takes us beyond the page and into the pulse of a forgotten eternity. A reality where Adam was not alone, where the serpent guarded more than it tempted, and where Eve carried within her a truth that heaven feared. It reminds us that creation was not a single act, but a layered unfolding. And we are still inside that unfolding, still walking between the garden and the wilderness, still hearing echoes of a voice that once said, Let there be. So what will you do with this knowledge? Will you dismiss it as just another legend? Will you tuck it away like the priests who once sealed it in those jars? Or will you let it stir something deeper within you, a hunger for the truth behind the truth? Perhaps that's all this scroll was ever meant to do. Not to replace the word, but to shake us awake. To remind us that before the world began, we were known, and that the path back home has always been hidden in the questions we were afraid to ask. If this truth resonates with you, if it burns within your heart, then don't let it fade. Let it drive you to seek, to listen, to awaken. Share this message, subscribe, like this video, and tell us in the comments. Where are you watching from? And have you ever felt like you remembered something you were never taught? Perhaps, just maybe, you've already touched the edges of the other Genesis and it's calling you home.